former Fulton County District Attorney and Sheriff.
Formerly a judge, and he knows a little bit about how these things go.
From Mohawk Valley, legal eagle, lawman.
He is the Sheriff of Fulton County, New York. Just such an amazing guy.
This is the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.
Hey, welcome to the Rich Giardino Show. I'm your host, Rich Giardino. Thanks for tuning in. Today is a quick summary of the first few hours of the President Trump's second administration and the last few hours of the President Biden only administration. It's kind of interesting. Biden leaves with a series of pardons, over 2,500, which is more than recent presidents have issued. Some of those pardons, which we'll talk about in a minute, are family related, which we expected. And then we'll talk about some of the executive orders that President Trump has revealed on his first few hours as president, and those he's been discussing for months. So let's start with President Joe Biden, because he just completed his term. And first thing this morning, we get news that Dr. Fauci's been pardoned, General Milley's been pardoned, and the January 6th staff and panel, including Liz Cheney, have gotten presumptive pardons. Now, it's kind of unusual to pardon somebody without there being a crime that is alleged to have been committed. So maybe the president knows something that the rest of us don't know. If they didn't commit any crime, there would be no reason to pardon them. But what's interesting is there's some argument from President Biden's team that, well, why should they spend thousands, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands of dollars defending themselves if they didn't do anything wrong? Well, if they didn't do anything wrong, they're not going to get indicted and they're not going to get charged. So those are interesting questions to ask as a whole. Also, without surprising anyone, President Biden did pardon his brother, his brother's wife, his niece, and other family members and other individuals who were involved in the investigation of the Biden payoffs and the use of President Biden when he was a vice president and senator, that the family members used his name and used his clout to try to raise money for themselves. So they've all been pardoned, effectively shutting down any future investigations of criminality or wrongdoing, because nothing can happen as a result of them. But again, several of those pardons are people who've never been charged with anything. So it begs the question, why do you pardon somebody if they haven't committed a crime, unless you pardon them to protect them or silence them? And obviously they're family members. And you have to remember, Bill Clinton pardoned his stepbrother, Roger Clinton, and Jimmy Carter pardoned Billy Carter, his brother, for some incidents that occurred when Billy Carter was using the Carter name. So those things are not uncommon. Hey, you're listening to Rich Giardino. We got new program now. We're going to be doing premium content, and to access it, it's you do locals with an S / the Rich Giardino Show. And it'll be premium contents with me included, some of the tips I can give you, some sidelines on interviews I've had with some of the people I've interviewed, also on up-to-date recordings of things going on in the news impacting the Constitution, politics, and crime, or all three. Again, it's locals / the Rich Giardino Show. Join us on that, and you'll be entitled to premium content that we don't display elsewhere. On a related note, President Trump said that regarding, this is Dr. Fauci's rules and regulations, and also the fact that the military required vaccines, and if you didn't get vaccinated or refused, you got fired, you lost your salary, and you may have been punished with your pension. So one of the executive orders he said he's signing this morning, which is the day of the inauguration, Monday the 20th, is that he's going to reinstate anyone who lost their job in the military because they refused a vaccine. Going to reinstate them with back pay if they wish to be reinstated. And going to clear expunge the record that they refused to comply with the military orders. So that's interesting. And one end, you have Fauci being pardoned. On the other end, you have President Trump ensuring that the men and women who served in our armed forces were not penalized on what we now know includes some faulty information. Certainly, it's argued that more people than we know were injured by the vaccine with either heart problems, heart attacks, strokes, than actually were injured by the COVID itself. We lost a lot of people in this country because of the COVID, but we also lost a lot of people and caused a lot of damage to individuals' health because of the required vaccines that some of us would argue, were not properly vetted. So it's kind of interesting, the dynamic of watching one guy on the way out the door, pardoning the guy who was the mastermind of requiring masks, which were ineffective, and 6 feet away versus 3 feet versus 10 feet, which we know now had little to do with it. And the one president taking care of the individuals who served our country but didn't want the vaccine. So interesting take there. Some of the executive orders that President Trump has already signed or indicated he'll sign by the end of the day, other than the military vaccine order, was to reinstate the building of the wall on the southern border. He's going to sign an executive order on that. And he also said that he's discussed a couple other issues. One is he's already signed an order to return to remain in Mexico policy, which was overturned when President Biden took office. And President Trump is reinstating the remain in Mexico policy. So you remain in Mexico, you apply to the United States, and we'll see if we're going to let you in. Not that you get in the country and then you get a pass and then you get lost in the system. So that's an interesting one. The other things that he's going to do that he may have already signed off on, he's revoking the top secret security clearance of 51 intel individuals, whether they were generals, whether they were CIA, FBI, other national alphabet soup. He said that what he was going to do is remove their privilege for the top secret security clearance. What does that mean? It means they will not have access to top briefings and things. And those are the 51 individuals, most of whom knowingly signed a letter stating that the laptop of Hunter Biden was consistent with Russian disinformation and misinformation and sounded more like a Russian conspiracy to influence the election and hurt President Biden than any real proof. The problem is the media knew that it was real. The FBI knew it was real. And several of these individuals, if not all of them, knew that it was Hunter Biden's laptop. And so President Biden has the authority to do so by removing it, their security clearance. And I think it's an appropriate thing under that situation because they knew when they signed it. They should have known, or they should have done due diligence. If you remember, for those watching or listening, 51 of them signed a letter saying that it was misinformation. And a day or two later in a debate, President Biden said, well, 51 intelligence leaders have all signed a letter saying it's Russian interference. They're just using my son to muddy the waters. And it's, not uncommon for the Russians to do that. And this is misinformation. Of course, we know that even Hunter Biden admitted that it was his laptop. And even the social media, which shut down any open discussion of it and any reporting of it, was tampering. They themselves were the ones tampering with the election. So that's one thing that's a pretty bold move. The other situation is that the President Trump has indicated that he's going to be drill, baby, drill, which he's been saying for the last year and a half. And he's removing some, if not all, the executive orders of President Biden that restricted where we can drill in the United States. and what we can drill for. You're listening to the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. This is a special update on day one of the Trump presidency and the last day of the Biden presidency. Stay tuned. Please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, X, Apple, and other reliable premium platforms for podcasts. Continuing with our program, there's a lot more that's going to happen. Tom Homan, the immigration czar, had indicated that he's putting a pause on the plans to enter the big cities and start arresting individuals who there are warrants for from Immigration Naturalization Services. They're going to put a pause on that because somebody leaked the plan. But interesting, what's gone on is there's been a couple TV interviews, reports, and a couple newspaper reports that many illegal immigrants who are being housed on your dime in hotels and across this country, given free money, free credit cards, are now self-deporting or removing themselves from the free living arrangements, which will further scatter them across the country, but it's designed to get them to leave without us having to spend money on doing so. Right now, they've indicated that they want to double or triple the number of beds that are necessary across the country for individuals who have warrants out for them, who have committed felonies either in our country or have criminal records in another country and are awaiting their immigration hearings. So that's from the handpicked czar that had previously been acting director, knows what he's doing, is very well respected among law enforcement, immigration services, Homeland Security, and the other national and federal agencies, as well as local police who've dealt with him, know what a reputation Mr. Holman has, Director Holman has, for being straight and direct with what his plans are and getting the job done. So that's interesting. On the front of the Senate hearings, so far they're only reviewing the top positions, but it sounds like Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi will be approved, removed from the committee to the full Senate. She did an excellent job answering the questions and combating some of the attacks. Pete Hegseth, looks like he's going to make it out of the committee and have a full vote before the Senate, which will ensure that he completes the nomination process and becomes the secretary. So we'll see a lot of interesting things going on in the next couple of weeks. Our own Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has a hearing this week on her appointment to the ambassador to the United Nations. And she's probably the most impartial and has the most bipartisan support of any of his many appointments to date. She's worked across the aisle. She's been there for the United States, and she's been there for President Trump, which is no small thing. She never wavered in her support of President Trump, despite all the attacks. I thank you for tuning in and listening to our special on inauguration, day one of the Trump presidency and the final day of the Joe Biden presidency. Thank you. Listen to us on YouTube, X, Spotify, Apple. There's so many, all the other premium channels. And please subscribe, share, like, and listen to us in the future so we can bring you more content. The other thing that's going to happen next is once the cabinet positions and directors and deputy cabinet positions hit the ground, they're going to have little time. They're not going to have a lot of time to get their agencies lined up with replacing individuals who they have appointment powers over. And you're going to see a shift in a whole new team coming in across the top, which we already know, but filtering down so that policy positions and deputy directors and deputy cabinet posts are filled with both people who are Trump loyalists, but also subscribe to wanting to reset and reboot America. I think people who are raised issues and attacked President Trump or his ideas should give it a year and see what happens, see where we are a year from now. Because I'm confident many of the policies, if you objectively look at them, are aimed to make this country safer, are aimed to build the economy, and are aimed to reduce the expense of gas, fuel, food, cars, and mortgages across the board. I think you'll see a much better emergency services FEMA team across the board. I think that one thing we all know is that under President Biden, very few people got fired, terminated, or sent packing. You had to actually be arrested 2 or 3 times for stealing luggage at an airport to lose your position in this, where other people would have lost it just for one arrest. So that's kind of interesting. And under the Biden administration, under Trump, I think if you don't live up to the high expectations to perform, and when I say perform, I mean to follow the law and the Constitution, but to carry out the policies and to implement them to the best of your abilities, following the Constitution, and try to reboot, like I said, reboot America so we're in the right direction. You've been listening to a special on day 1 of the Trump presidency and the final day of the Biden presidency. I'm Rich Giardino, your host. You're listening to the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet. I hope you've enjoyed a couple of the tips and conversations I have. And I hope that by the time you listen to this, there will be much more to absorb that's going on. Whether you agree with President Trump 100% or just 55%, it's a pretty good record. Right now, according to polls by CBS, also by CNN had a poll out, and New York Times did a questioning of individuals. Even if people did not vote for President Trump, they're supportive of reducing crime. They're supportive of removing criminal aliens. They're supportive of finding the 300,000 children that are missing that have come over the border in the last several years to ensure their safety. We know from our arrests and from the landscape that many of these kids are exploited for sexual purposes, exploited as workers, and exploited for other purposes. One of the major things he's going to do with executive order is identify the cartels that have creeped into this country, and then they haven't even crept in. They've made it blatant. Label them as terrorists and target them as the terrorists that they are, so that we can put more resources and devote more law enforcement towards removing them from our country or arresting them. Again, thanks a lot for listening. Hope you enjoyed our program.
Like and subscribe to The Rich Giardino Show, part of the Elite Influencer Network, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time on The Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.